The NFL offseason finally here. Welcome back to the podcast, Papa Sherm knows. We are going to get into the offseason and the Kansas City Chiefs offseason in this episode. A lot of decisions to make. Going to be a very interesting spring and summer to just watch and see what Veach does. I mean, last offseason was a pretty crazy one. I don't think it'll be as crazy as last year, but again, a lot of decisions to make for Veach and Reed and the rest of the staff going into 2023. I'm going to get into, obviously, the draft season coming up. First year, I'm really kind of engaged and kind of, mock drafting and kind of learning these prospects a little bit better than I usually do. I don't pay too much attention to the draft ever, it seems. I kind of do there at the end, but I'm going to try to keep tabs on the combine, which I think starts tonight. I'm pretty sure. Finally turning over to March. It's kind of crazy how quick the first 2 months of 2023 has been. And seeing the Kansas City Chiefs win another Super Bowl, pretty exciting stuff. And so I'm going to just get right into the offseason stuff. The draft stuff I'm going to kind of save for the end. And just to kind of look at, first things first, the roster. I kind of was just going over the roster and the salary cap. And, obviously, so you've got a lot of decisions to make. Juju Smith-Schuster, a big one. Andrew Wiley, another big one. Just for the fact of how he played in that Super Bowl down the stretch. Orlando Brown Jr., another one, huge decision to make. More than likely going to tag him, and that's already come out. We all kind of felt like that was probably where they were going to go. The cap is $2 million, or not the cap, but the tag is $2 million more than it was a year ago. So we'll see how. I don't know if that'll affect Orlando Brown's decision at all. Just for the simple fact that I think the contract that the Chiefs offered was supposed to play out at, I think, $22 million a year, roughly. So, still, that's $4 million off from last year, and he declined that contract offer, obviously. So, we'll see what Orlando Brown wants and what kind of money Orlando Brown is going to want to try to go long term, but the tag I think is just the best fit, and I don't want to say for both sides at this point because I feel like I kind of noticed a trend in my own kind of thinking on things because one, Frank Clark is a guy to me that's I don't want to say necessity necessarily, but he is such a vital part of the defense. If Frank Clark is not there, the Chiefs do not win Super Bowl 54. Frank Clark, didn't show up as big in the Super Bowl, obviously, this go around, but the playoffs in general, he was awesome. Chris Jones, obviously, the best player on the defense this year for the Kansas City Chiefs. Best defensive player in the league. I think you could throw his name up there, and I think a lot of Chiefs Kingdom feel like he may have gotten robbed in that Defensive Player of the Year. But translating that back to the offensive line, obviously there's been a lot of times Frank Clark hasn't showed up during the season, and times when you needed him to be there. And Orlando Brown is that same person on the offensive side of the ball. And, if you know me, I'm more of a defensive-minded person. I love the defensive aspect of the game, and a low-scoring game is fine with me. I'm just as cool with that as a high-scoring game. I feel like sometimes I prefer it more in this day and age. It's crazy to say that when Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback of your favorite team. So, anyways, moving on from that, I'm just saying I'm noticing feel like I give more of a pass to the defensive guys. Especially when they're showing up in the playoffs and towards the end of the season when it really counts. And that's what Orlando Brown did. So I don't want to say that this tagging him is necessarily beneficial to him because he probably deserves a pretty good contract and can get one from most teams, I would assume, if he were to go out into free agency. So I say it's the smartest thing for the Chiefs to tag him. I did kind of a hypothetical trade with him in one of my mock drafts. And just to move up to get another left tackle, but there's obviously nothing out there free agency wise that you would replace Orlando Brown Jr. with, and I don't think really in the draft there is. So I'm gonna get into that more later, but kind of going back to just the salary cap. So Frank Clark is a guy that's on here on the salary cap that some insane numbers. For next year, he is going to account for a $28.6 million cap hit. And that seems insane because that's more than what Chris Jones will hit for, which is 28.2, I believe, in that range. Yeah, 28.2, almost 28.3. So to see the two cap hits between Frank Clark and Chris Jones, obviously Chris Jones is another subject that he's going into the final year of his contract. Frank Clark's definitely going to have to come down off of that, and I'm sure maybe next year. I don't know. I'm no GM or know the salary cap and how that works like that. So we'll see what Veach, the mastermind of Brett Veach, does with Frank Clark. I'm sure that if Frank Clark's going to stay around, I feel like I heard someone saying that he may retire, or I've kind of seen that thought online. And, maybe, I don't know, it almost seems like he doesn't have like a ton of gas left in the tank. So maybe Frank Clark comes back for one more season with the Kansas City Chiefs. But I highly doubt I don't know. I just highly doubt that he wants to separate from the Chiefs organization. Just everything that kind of towards the Super Bowl and, the kind of interviews he was given and talking about Andy and the organization and the fact that he took the pay cut he did last year and how much he worked with George Karlaftis and helped him get to, another level. We saw it all through camp, him working with him after practice and during practice. So, anyways, to get off that tangent, to just go to something's got to happen with this cap space, with especially Frank Clark. Patrick Mahomes is looking at a $49 million cap hit. Past that, you got Joe Tooney at $22 million. $14 million for Travis Kelce, just under 15, 14.8. Justin Reed, 12.7. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, $11 million. Past that, everyone's 5 and below. 5.1 for Harrison Butker and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who that will get into my next point of the Chiefs have officially declined, or not officially, but is rumored to decline Clyde Edwards-Helaire's fifth-year option. And I don't think that's too much of a shock, especially with the emergence of Pacheco. The only thing that I think past that, which I think with the way the contract works out on that fifth year, it goes up quite a bit. So I assume they'll just move on from him, and there's possibility maybe you draft a running back late or, middle rounds if you find a guy you like for the Kansas City Chiefs. Please, not the first round. I think we all can agree on that. But to look at where you're at with your roster of Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, Colin Saunders, Andrew Wiley, Orlando Brown Jr. we talked about. All these guys have no contract. So I don't know. I don't know what the Chiefs plan to do necessarily. I don't know if they keep Juju or Mecole Hardman, honestly. And I think you can draft around that because still you would have MVS, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore. And I'm personally very high on Sky Moore. I think next year Sky Moore is going to have a breakout season. I don't think he's going to be necessarily top 10 receiver in the league or anything like that, but I think he's going to have a huge impact on this team, and he might, eat up a lot of stuff, that we saw Mecole Hardman in, and, he'll just grow into a much, much better role. My biggest thing about this offense, though, next year, that I feel like you need a guy that was, like Juju. Juju was perfect for the role that he played, and kind of just being another possession target that kind of Mahomes could find moving around and, a guy that was just gonna find a hole in the zone. Stick kind of close, 15 yards in, and find a hole in the defense while Mahomes moves around. And I really liked how Juju complimented not only Kelsey, but then, especially Kadarius Toney and MVS too. So MVS is still going to be on the books for next year pretty much no matter what. So I personally like drafting a receiver early. And I think edge rusher and tackle are probably the other two big ones that you want to find early. I think if we're talking more so right tackle, maybe you can kind of find somebody a little bit later, and I mean second, third roundish maybe. We'll see how that goes, but for the Kansas City Chiefs, they're gonna have to figure something out because the cap room, like I said, they're negative in space. Right now, it's calculated to, it looks like negative. There's less than $1 million, so almost negative five. Yeah, almost negative 500,000 in cap space. So not terrible, but they're gonna have to figure out how to do something because I think you probably tag Orlando Brown is the plan. Chris Jones, you'd like to see extended. I don't know. Maybe there's some free agents out there that you can target. Maybe another guy, a receiver. I don't know though because I feel like the Chiefs have set themselves up pretty good at receiver with Justin Ross, John Ross, both being there and will be part of the team next year. And just a little bit we saw it of Justin Ross in camp. I like it. I like the idea of it, but I feel like I also understand the aspect of like that necessarily might not work out. You've got, just look at the Josh Gordon situation. With Josh Gordon, he just didn't quite pan out here in Kansas City. Justin Watson is another guy that is a free agent now too, I think. So a lot of your receivers, really, you got Kadarius Toney and Juju Smith-Schuster, or not Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, along with MVS left. So you've got about 3 receivers right now, and I think you could pick up a couple of receivers in the draft, and Justin Ross and John Ross as well. So we'll see what the Kansas City Chiefs decide to do with that receiver position. I think that at least a couple guys you want to draft. I really like Josh Downs out of UNC. If you can find a way to get him early, that's a guy that's going to go late, probably to mid-second round. So, if you're going to snag him, you probably got to get him with 31 unless you're going to move up. And I think that's kind of what I'm going to play around with in my next mock draft is kind of being able to trade up. I did that in my second one as well with the hypothetical Orlando Brown trade. So I think I'm gonna try to figure out how to do that maneuver up and get him in a draft, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes. I'll definitely be putting out a mock draft 2.0, and definitely once this combine starts going and getting to see what some of these guys can do in the combine too, and just another step in the process towards the draft. So with that, I'm going to stay on the topic of the offseason just to go to pretty much got to everything except so a hypothetical trade that I saw. I can't remember who posted it or where I saw this, but it was Jalen Ramsey possibility to the Chiefs. I think somebody said that somebody mentioned it or something. I don't know. Either way, a hypothetical trade with Jalen Ramsey to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think I really dislike it. I'm not a big fan of it, and I haven't followed Jalen Ramsey very closely or anything, but I feel like he was kind of starting to slide a little bit last year, and I can't remember if he was hurt at all. I feel like he was hurt a little bit, so that may be part of it, but also a guy that, he's been in the league for a while. He's kind of getting up there in age. I don't know what his contract's like or what that would be like to take on. I haven't done any research into that, and maybe I will and talk about that in a blog or a, podcast later on. But I don't know. I just don't think it's a great idea. And the fact that you have all of this talent with all these rookies to progress next year, I feel like I want to see all these guys on the field. I want to see McDuffie. I want to see Joshua Williams. I want to see Jalen Watson. I want to see all three of them on the field all year next year. And you still have L'Jarius Sneed. So, I mean, that's right there off the top. You have four really good corners. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a fifth good corner. But, what do you have to give up? What kind of possible draft capital would Jalen Ramsey command? I don't know. There's too many questions in there before I do, I guess, a little bit of homework on it to think about where, I don't know, how he would fit into this defense. And obviously, the defense wasn't the greatest, that secondary. But I don't know. If you've been following along with Papa Schro here, I really like this defense, just all together, top to bottom. Brian Cook is another guy, another young guy that I feel like I want to see on the field next year quite a bit. That also goes to kind of going back to what we were talking about before, the question of Juan Thornhill and if he'll be back next year or not. So, a lot of questions. I would not mind, depending on the price, for Thornhill coming back. I like the idea of Thornhill returning. You got Thornhill, Cook, Reed. I mean, I feel like it's a pretty good group of safeties. I feel like they did a really good job this year. I really do feel like the safeties were pretty good. At times, they faltered big, but there was a lot of really good moments for the safeties, I feel. I don't know, man. I'm just partial on the defense, I feel. And just the guys that we acquired last year, I was high on going into the season, and to see the way that they performed, I mean, is just amazing. It was really awesome to see. I mean, this team won a Super Bowl. What can you say? This team won a Super Bowl with all these rookies. So it is a positive going into this offseason is how many really good rookies you have on the team. Going kind of back to the offensive line side, Lucas Niang is a tough one that I feel like you cannot count on that man to be healthy is the only problem. And, it just is what it is. It sucks in the NFL, I feel like, for these guys to, be labeled as injury prone because just as an athlete, I mean, I know that just sucks. It's not fair, but, it is what it is. And Lucas Niang, though, I don't think that you can count on him to stay healthy. Darian Kennard, I'm also very interested still on. But my biggest thing against Darian Kennard is just obviously this staff wasn't seeing what they needed to out of him last year. With he was always playing with the threes, never really crept up into even contending. Because I feel like there was times where maybe you thought maybe he could be a starter. I mean, just the thought of before camp and stuff, just because who was going to be the starter? I think Niang was already out. So, I don't know. And I can't remember exactly what was going on with Wiley. Anyways, I was also really high on Darian Kennard. Big old right tackle that just looks like he could take down a brick wall. So, definitely, I wanted to start the podcast off with this, but I got in the off season with the whole intro. But Eric Bieniemy has officially moved on to the offensive coordinator position for the Washington Commanders. And that happened now, I think about a week ago. And so not only has he taken that job, he also dons the assistant coach position with the offensive coordinator position in Washington. The Chiefs have now officially announced Matt Nagy will take over as the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2023. So the Chiefs kind of have I won't say a whole staff because Greg Williams, the running back coach, he interviewed. I don't know if he has got the job or not under Rivera / Bieniemy. for the running backs coach in Washington. So, one thing that I really took away from the press conference, there's a couple things. I'm going to get into the negatives in a minute. But the biggest positive, I feel like, just because I'm a very firm believer of if you are comfortable, that's the I can't remember the exact quote now off the top of my head. See, this is why I wanted to start the podcast off with this. But either way, the enemy of progress is comfort. So being comfortable is the enemy of progress, and I absolutely agree with that. I feel like you have to be uncomfortable to progress in life, and anything that's worth doing is going to be hard. And I feel like he really reiterated that, the accountability part too, of just wanting to be accountable and knowing that that is such a big trait in a person. And so I feel like I took nothing but positives from Eric Bieniemy's speech. I mean, I think we're all really rooting for Bieniemy at this point. I feel like I'm unsure. Obviously, one of the great offensive coordinators for the Kansas City Chiefs all time. Just being part of this era. One thing early in the interview, although I did take away from that, he did go on to say this a couple other times, and maybe he didn't mean it the way I took it the first time. But when asked about the difference of being in Kansas City as the offensive coordinator and being in Washington as the offensive coordinator, the first thing Bieniemy said is, well, the difference is in Washington, I'm the offensive coordinator. And so I just thought that, that was not a dig or anything, but just, like, hey, this is all me, and he's not lying. I mean, he is the top guy of this offense. He is the guy. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, I mean, Ron Rivera was a very good defensive coordinator and head coach, very defensive head coach, played defense. Jack Del Rio is the defensive coordinator, also been a head coach. There's a lot of talent coaching on this team, so I feel like I'm also excited for Bieniemy on that fact as well. And they have a lot of talent. Obviously they're a quarterback away from being a pretty good team, I think, and contending in that NFC East division. Not saying that they're going to win the division, but I think they can contend with the roster that they have if they had a, better quarterback. Carson Wentz has been released, so I think Heineke is a free agent, so we'll see where they go with their quarterback situation. But no, what I said earlier about getting into the negatives later, I feel like the negative of this situation is this is the situation. The fact that this was essentially a head coach press conference. I mean, this is exactly what you would set up a head coach press conference, or how you would set it up. And, it just doesn't feel, I don't know, it just doesn't feel genuine. It's like this guy should have been a head coach years ago in this league. No one has hired him, and they've, hired guys like Nathaniel Hackett. Guys like Josh McDaniels has a job in the NFL. And I mean, I think that's just it just sucks. I mean, Josh McDaniels, and not to say that Josh McDaniels didn't deserve a second chance in Vegas or anything like that, but at the end of the day, I mean, Josh McDaniels is just not, he's proved it over a second time, but did not seem like a competent head coach in Denver all those years ago, and the only thing he's ever done is be the coordinator for Belichick. And again, just like Bieniemy said, how I talked about earlier, comfort is the enemy of progress. And, obviously if you're going right back to the same situation that you were comfortable in before, you're comfortable in now, even more so now with head coaching experience and, feeling like you're the guy, which, hey, it is what it is. I just feel like with Bieniemy not getting a job in the league, it's definitely, it's disappointing. And the fact that he got an OC job and you threw an assistant head coach job on the title and gave him this big press conference, I don't know. It's just annoying. And, he at 150 50% deserves it. But I feel like Bieniemy deserved this press conference under different circumstances years ago. And no matter what you think about him amongst Chiefs Kingdom, you know, look at these other guys that have gotten the head coaching jobs. Bieniemy has deserved it, and it's good to see that he's getting another opportunity somewhere else, and hopefully this will lead to, what Bieniemy deserves. Even if he fails at a head coaching job, I feel like he deserves the opportunity to fail. And because I don't think that you can honestly convince anyone after all the success that he's going to fail, because it's not like Andy Reid pushes out guys that just fail. I mean, I know Matt Nagy has a certain reputation as a head coach, but how about Doug Peterson? I mean, so you can't just single him out as saying, okay, well, Andy Reid guys aren't going to get chances as well as or aren't going to get chances now just because Matt Nagy wasn't the greatest head coach ever, which, whatever. So I wanted to talk about the Eric Bieniemy hiring and how that affected the Kansas City Chiefs, or how that's going to affect Kansas City Chiefs 2023. I'm excited for Matt Nagy to take over the offensive coordinator position. I'm excited to see, a little bit of a change up and some different things with the Chiefs offense, and see what maybe some different eyes will put on the offense. And we'll see what happens, I think it was a pretty good year in 2017 when Nagy was the offensive coordinator, and he was the co-offensive coordinator in 2016, which not as great of a year, but the turnaround going from him and Childress sharing the duty to just Nagy. Nagy had a really good season in 2017 as the Chiefs offensive coordinator. So I think that rounds everything out pretty much. Besides, let's get into the draft stuff. So I talked about it in the beginning, and so we'll get into it now with the NFL draft. Me just kind of getting into it a little bit more. And so I put out my mock draft 1.0 in blog form earlier this week on Monday, I think. And so the very first draft, just to go over kind of what I've done in my 3 drafts. So I put 3 mock drafts together that I've done on PFF, and the very first one, I went in blind, first of all. So that was one thing I'm not as high on this draft class as I was in the beginning, because so round 1, pick 31. I didn't do any trades in this, so it's just the Kansas City Chiefs picks. Andre Carter the second out of Army, and I'm high on the potential that Andre Carter has, just because on tape what he looks like is, kind of insane. Just to see the way he drops back and defends the pass is crazy for his size. 6'7" with a crazy wingspan, and at 260. The biggest issue with him is his size, though, and, just not having the muscle mass. I guess I shouldn't say his size, just the muscle on him. He got bullied in, was at the Senior Bowl. I mean, absolutely bullied. So, and seen some clips of one-on-ones where he's just getting tossed around. So, at the NFL level, he's definitely going to have to change that if he's going to be, any type of good edge rusher. Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's your job number one, is you're an edge rusher. Great, you can drop back into coverage. But I think it gives versatility, and a guy like Spags that likes to, really come with crazy blitzes and dropping, this guy or that guy into coverage. Pretty sure he dropped Colin Saunders into coverage a couple times this year, which, oh man, I hope the Chiefs re-sign Colin Saunders. He's one of my favorite guys on that defense. But, just a guy that you can be really versatile with is Andre Carter, I think. Big risk, big project. And I've noticed he's falling in a lot of people's eyes. And just with this mock draft, going back to it, I think a week and a half later, because the night that I wrote that was Sunday night and put it out on Monday. When I was writing it that Sunday night, I did my other 2 drafts, and that was probably about a week or so after, week and a half maybe. I did this first one I went in blind on, and Andre Carter was, valued pretty high. He's still valued pretty high, but the big board, he was 24 at this point, and I didn't pick him again on anything, but I definitely think he's a lot lower on the big board now. I might be wrong, and this is for PFF, so obviously the draft simulator on PFF that pretty much everyone uses. They gave me a B+ for this draft. So the next one, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, Jalen Hyatt at 63 overall, and watched a little bit of his tape, and I'm not down on him at all, but my guy is Josh Downs out of UNC. I feel like that's the guy. Josh Downs is just the way he controls the ball in the air, and can maneuver to catch the ball, and the route running that he possesses is really, I think, just like Juju. What I was talking about is I feel like you need a really good route runner to replace Juju, and Josh Downs may be that guy. I mean, obviously that first year he's probably not going to come in and be a superstar, but I feel like down the road that's a guy that the Kansas City Chiefs could really build on and have a really good receiver. Pick 95, Isaiah McGuire out of Missouri. I'm going to just kind of go through this at this point. 123, D-tackle Byron Young out of Bama. At 133, linebacker out of Auburn, Owen Popo. I think that's how you say that. I waited till 168 in round 5 to get a tackle in Ryan Hayes out of Michigan. And that was one that I wanted to go higher for a tackle on, but I think that I just got beat out to some other tackles earlier, so I waited until later. Tight end out of Cincinnati, Josh Wiley at 178. Another defensive tackle, DJ Dale from Bama at 217. At 219 in the 6th round, Jadakiss Bonds out of Hampton. Wide receiver, 6'4", and he's pretty fast. I mean, he was getting around on tape, just blowing right by guys, and really good deep route guy. We'll see how it translates to the NFL, because I feel like you could tell just on tape the level of competition he was playing was, maybe not the greatest level, but at least from the little bit that I watched, because I think I just watched a bunch from one game. So either way, Jadakiss Bonds is a guy that I really like out of Hampton, and he's kind of a late round receiver, and I feel like that right there is the guy to go get a receiver late in the draft. Could maybe feel like a Sammy Watkins type. He's not like the biggest speedster in the receiver room, but he's a big body that can get past, and get on the other side of the defense, and if you can maybe work on him, teach that route running a little bit better, and finding holes in the defense, get into Andy Reid's offense, I think Jadakiss Bonds could be a major threat. And I think the Chiefs need a bigger receiver. I feel like we went through MVS is kind of that, but I mean he's just, I don't know what he's at, maybe 6'1", 6'2", I think. He's not a big receiver, but he's your traditional receiver, I feel. But Jadakiss Bonds is just it's a big dude, 6'4". I mean, that's a big target for Mahomes to be throwing to. Safety out of Iowa at 227, Kayvon Merriweather. Travis Dye at 251, running back out of USC, and Nico Rimagio. I probably just botched the hell out of that name. That receiver out of Fresno State got the 257 to round out the draft. PFF gave me a B+ overall. I'm not the biggest fan of this draft at this point. And I didn't really love Isaiah McGuire on tape, because I did watch a little bit of his tape, and I mean, solid, but there's definitely some other guys that I'd rather have. And at that pick at 95, maybe not terrible. But so my hypothetical trade, I kind of looked at Orlando Brown's trade from Kansas City to or from Baltimore to Kansas City, and kind of went off that a little bit to trade for the 11th overall pick with Tennessee that would have had Orlando Brown packaged in on a sign and trade, long-term deal or longer-term deal in Tennessee after they had just dropped what is this? Taylor Lewan, which I don't know. I feel like looking back at that, I feel like it's a major hypothetical because then also, I mean, go with the guy that's proven over somebody that's not. But I feel like, with me drafting the left tackle at 11, yeah, what's the point of Tennessee trading for Orlando Brown? I gave them the 63rd, 133rd, and 257th overall picks in the draft, so 3 picks for the Titans. I received the first round pick at 11 and 186 in the draft, which would have been a 6-rounder, as well as Tennessee getting Orlando Brown. Peter Skoronski was my pick at 11, and we'll see what he measures up at the combine, but a lot of people complain about the short arms. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a huge deal. My thought also was, because I drafted another tackle in this draft, but my thought was, you can move him over to left guard because, I mean, Tooney's getting older, and not this season. I haven't played tackle this season. But I don't know, big risk to put on Pat's blind side of a, rookie coming in to play left tackle. I then traded away the 31st overall pick to the Saints. I got the 40th, 115th, 148th, and 167th pick in the draft. So we picked up 4 other draft picks for the 31st overall pick in the draft. And with that, then I moved on down a little bit further, giving the Detroit Lions the 40th overall pick, 123rd overall pick, and we would receive the 48th and 81st overall pick to move up and draft another one. I might not mess this one up. Felix Ndike or Anudike Uzoma. Definitely butchered that name. Edge rusher out of K-State. Really liked his tape. Shout out to Eric for putting me on to that pick right there. Mentioned him, looked him up, and pretty damn good, I think, and could fill a role instantly on this team next year. So I did like that pick. PFF graded that at an A, so I like that too. So at that point is where I moved up, and I moved up to get Josh Downs at 52 overall. I ended up trading the 168th, 178th, and 186th. That's 2 6-rounders and a 5th rounder, as well as a 2nd-round pick for 2024. Probably overspent a little bit, but also with the draft being in Kansas City, it would be fun to see the Chiefs move around. I'm sure Brett Veach could pull off a much better deal than I did right there. PFF graded my trade at a D+. Fair enough. But I wanted to get Josh Downs, which was an A+ pick at 52 overall. The PFF graded it. I didn't like my F grade for Blake Freeland I got. And I got him at 81 overall in the 3rd round. Tackles are kind of flying off the board, so I decided to go ahead and grab Blake Freeland then. And I feel like he's kind of considered as like top 10 kind of fringe tackles in this draft, but a guy that maybe you could be kind of flexible with, move him to right, left tackle, see what he does. And again, if Skoronski, in this situation, if Skoronski is a guy that, maybe wants to move into a guard role, move him into guard, and you got Blake Freeland there. So, D tackle, Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin was the next pick at 95 overall. Carl Brooks, edge rusher, Bowling Green at 115. So kind of stacking up on the defense. Got 2 edge rushers and a tackle at that point. And my next guy that is probably one of my favorite guys in this draft now, at 148, Ivan Pace Jr. out of Cincinnati. That dude just plays the game of football how it's meant to be played. That dude is constantly flying all over the field. Great tackler, shoots the gap like perfectly and effortlessly. Just another guy that you could throw into the mix that I feel like would be really good on this defense. And I feel like Ivan Pace Jr. is like maybe my number one guy that I want the Chiefs to get. Him and Josh Downs are right there, but like on realistic picks for the Chiefs, like on my board, Josh Downs, Ivan Pace Jr., like right there, 1A, 1B. At 167, Quindell Johnson out of Memphis is where I went. And at 217, then when that rolled around, another safety in Trey Dean III out of Florida. So we pick up 2 more safeties, and that would maybe help out with, especially if you don't get Juan Thornhill back. Tight end at 219, Luke Schoonmaker. At 227 went Jadakiss Bonds a little bit later in this draft. In the 7th round, and then Tavion Thomas at 251, which there was a couple other running backs there, and I kind of looked all of them up and looked at just a little bit of tape and, very minimal pretty much to kind of make a decision. But Tavion Thomas was a big power back, and I thought, the Chiefs don't really have a big power back. Pacheco will run right through you, but he's not necessarily like a big, Tavion Thomas was like 240. Big dude, like 6 foot 240, I think, maybe 6'1", I can't remember exactly, but big running back, and I think that would suit well for the Chiefs, especially the way that they've been on 1-yard plays. I feel like the Chiefs are one of the worst teams on like 3rd and 4th and 1, and I don't know what it is because 3rd and 20 is nothing, but you get the Chiefs in a 3rd and 1 and it's over. And so let's see. Let's move on to the final draft that I had in here. And this one was a little bit different. I had to improvise a little bit in this one, but you'll notice some familiar names and in this one. But at 31, no trades in this one either. And this was the last one that I did, and I haven't done another one since then. This was Sunday night. So 31, Will McDonald out of Iowa State. At 63, Nathaniel Dell out of Houston, which Dell I do really like. He's a speedster. He would fit in this offense, but I almost feel like he's maybe a little bit faster version of Josh Downs. I don't want to say version of Josh Downs, but, I just feel like I would rather have the abilities that Josh Downs has over Dell, just because with Dell, it's not as precise. The route running's not as good. And I just feel like with what the Chiefs need right now, because I feel like with Sky Moore, and Sky Moore's good route runner in the way that he's played, and Kadarius Toney, you kind of got your guys that you're going to use for, a lot of speed and a lot of motion and things like that. So I feel like Dell here is another guy. It's like putting McCole Hardman back in the offense almost is the best way I could say. Sam Laporta at 95 out of Iowa. And Laporta, at this point, I've seen a lot of people online drafting him to the Chiefs. And I didn't think too much of it. And I haven't thought too much of tight end just because I think Gray's still under contract, but Fortson is not going into the offseason. And then I don't see Blake Bell staying around for another year, and then obviously Kelsey. So tight end is a good pick somewhere in the middle, I think, for the Kansas City Chiefs. But after watching Sam Laporta on tape, that guy is the guy. He is definitely the tight end to go for, and a guy that can line up a receiver. I feel like on tape reminds me of Kelsey to a point, just in a college sense, because how versatile Kelsey is lining up everywhere and motioning and just what he does on the field. I feel like Laporta can kind of replicate, and if he was in the same room as Kelsey learning, I feel like would be a great fit for both and for the Kansas City Chiefs for sure. Moreau Ojomo out of Texas, defensive tackle at 123. Went Ivan Pace Jr. again at 133. So a lot higher, I feel. 133, and then the last draft, what did we say? We got him at 148. So not a lot higher, but still, that's about 15 selections higher. But still, just for the talent that he is, that's, I feel like, who I would want to see the Chiefs get somewhere around that point. 168, Luke Haggard. And at 178 is another guy that I would just kind of like to point out, in Keaton Mitchell out of East Carolina. I think is a solid running back that you could maybe use in the receiving game more so. Just the way he plays the game, and I feel like that kind of hybrid position Andy likes of being able to kind of run, use motion to run and different kind of back and forth stuff that Andy likes to do, and he could fit that mold perfectly, depending on how good his hands are is the only problem. But that kid plays every down like he's got to score a touchdown. So Trey Dean III, went with him again, this time at 217. I'm going to flash back to that last one, 217. So both drafts picking him up at 217. Move on to 219, Aubrey Miller Jr., linebacker, Jackson State. Cameron Young, defensive tackle, at 227. And then I think it was maybe right before 251, Jadakiss Bonds came off the board. So I ended up going safety Daniel Scott at 251. And then Redzone Wright out of Oregon State was 257. I watched a little bit of tape on him, and I like Wright, honestly, and he was a last chance U guy is what I got out of my little bit of research on him. But all in all, man, I've got like 3, I feel like, solid guys that I really want to see the Chiefs draft and would like to see in this Chiefs organization. And like I said, Josh Downs, Ivan Pace Jr., Jadakiss Bonds, I feel like, are 3 guys that I would really like to see on this team. Keaton Mitchell may be kind of a guy. I might watch a little bit more tape on him. And Sam Laporta as well are 2 other guys. And really just kind of go to that edge spot at 31. I feel like it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky to play. Who's going to fall there? Who may be there? Will McDonald may be a guy. He was the big board 31, and I got him at 31. But we'll kind of see where the Chiefs want to go with an edge rusher, or if that's what they're going to go first. I feel like you still maybe need another guy to draft to be there and develop as a really good edge rusher, hopefully for the Kansas City Chiefs. But we'll see. All in all, that's really pretty much it. I just wanted to get out a pod just kind of talking about everything that's went on already. It's been kind of crazy, and I mean, this podcast has gone on longer than I feel like any other podcast that I've done so far by myself, but on this show. But that's just everything that's happening, everything that's been going on with Kansas City Chiefs. So if you are still listening, I really appreciate you if you're rocking with me. Subscribe to the podcast. You can on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon as well. Google Podcasts, if anyone uses that. I don't think they do. I've never used Google Podcasts. Anyways, Papa Shro knows is there if you want to listen to it there. Substack, if you want to read some of my articles I put out, go subscribe over to the Substack. If you're listening on Substack and haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe. It's free. What else was I going to say? I'm working right now on a YouTube channel as well, so hopefully we'll be taking this podcast video form. And so if you want to stay updated on everything, subscribe to the Substack. You get an email every time I post. Every time that I post something, I put the podcast on Substack. I put up, obviously, all my blogs on podcast. It's getting late. I put all my podcasts on Substack as well, so you get an email every time that I post on there. So I appreciate you. Let me know what you think about this Chiefs team. What do they need to do in the offseason? What does Brett Veach need to do? Who do the Chiefs need to draft? Who is your guy in this draft? I feel like I'm starting to get a couple of guys that I really want to see on this team, and let me know who your guy is and who you're consistently drafting on the PFF mock draft simulator. I appreciate all the support, and we'll be back real soon with another podcast to get you updated on Papa Schro's mock draft 2.0. So we will see you then.